Good morning, everyone. This is Dennis Green. I am just so happy to be here with you and with my friend, Pastor Eric Lavrance, who is the pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Edmond. And we've known each other for going on 20 years. And just before we started the webinar, Pastor Eric was giving me an update on his 4 kids, and I remember before they were born, and I remember when I was your age, and I remember the chaos of having kids, and they're all doing 3 different things at any given moment. And I'm sure you and Jen feel like a combination of chauffeur and logistics experts and registered nurse and every other manner of thing. Am I right?
Oh yeah, and then like one little thing, throws you off into chaos. And we had our water off yesterday because the city was working in front of our house from 12:30 until 1 a.m. last night. So I've never been so glad to hear a toilet run into the middle of the night in my life as I was last night. So yeah, but we're doing great. We're doing great.
That's okay. And then when did you get back from your Holy Land tour?
Well, yeah, so we got back June 3rd. So that's our 5th trip over there, and we do those about once a year, and I'm doing the teaching and leading, and so that's just a great experience to deepen your walk with Jesus.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Well, now keep me in mind, because one of my life goals is to go to the Holy Land. My wife and I both want to go, and I know you're going to think I'm weird, but one of my top priorities when I get to the Holy Land is to go windsurfing on the Sea of Galilee. That's kind of a life goal.
They do that there. They do. We actually got kicked out of the Sea of Galilee this last time because there was a storm that came up, like all of a sudden, just like popped up, and all of a sudden, and they had funnels going around.
Oh my goodness.
We were swimming in the Sea of Galilee, and they came by and said, "You all need to get out. This is a dangerous situation." So, but this guy came along. He just raised his arms and said, "Peace, be still." The whole thing just calmed down within about 30 seconds. So,
yeah, I bet that was just so cool to just imagine Jesus at the same spot, in the same kind of storm. And
absolutely.
Now, which one of your kids went with you?
My older son Calvin went last year, and then my son Hank, who's 13, second son, went this year.
Oh man, that just sounds epic. That just sounds cool. Well, anyway, man, thank you so much for volunteering to join me on this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I've worked with more than 200 churches, and we've over the past 30 something years, and I think you are the winner for doing the most capital campaigns, and it's fun that we have this relationship. And I appreciate you sharing your information, and people who are on this webinar, they can share it with their committees and their church members, and it'll be available to anybody. And we've been around since 1992, and our mission really is to promote stewardship. And we get paid to do church capital campaigns, but then we give away all of our stewardship information like this. And it's resulted, as you can see, we raised a ton of money, and I made a lot of friends. It's how I met my wife. It's really a joyful work. And the core belief rotates around one of our topics today, discernment. And for me, that's a joyful way that makes us different, community building, engagement, and discernment. I'm such a nerd. Here's my latest book. This is a book about discernment I just got in the mail about St. Ignatius Loyola and the art of discernment. And I think that's a critical part of our faith life. And it's a joy to share that value with you and to be part of churches that are embracing that. My favorite scripture is 1 Peter 4:10. That just talks about how God has given us everything that we have, and it's up to us to figure out, to discern how to share those blessings with others. So here's our agenda. We're going to cover these 3 points. We're going to talk about engagement, prayer and discernment, keys to success, failures to avoid. And it's kind of cool that you've been down this road, Pastor Eric.
Yep.
So this is me. You know this already. I've had all this experience, and I've written this book. You can get it for free. Send me a note. I'll send you the book. But tell us more about you. Now, for a highly educated person, people really want to know, are you crazy for doing 4 capital campaigns? But to share a little bit about yourself before we begin, Pastor Aaron.
Yeah, so we've been in Edmond for almost 7 years. Before that, we were in Kansas City for about 10 years, and haven't been a pastor for quite 30 years yet. But love ministry, love serving the people of God, love preaching and teaching, and that's pretty much what I do here at First Pres. We want to focus on that. 4 kids, oldest is 16, youngest is 8. My wife teaches Bible for Oklahoma Christian School, and I'm involved in some theology and leadership stuff for our denomination as well. And so stay active, runner, and love to read and hike and all kinds of stuff. So love to go to the movies. I'll see a movie a lot of Fridays
Oh, fun.
on my day off, and a lot of times I'll just go alone, which used to scare me to death.
Ah,
But it's a nice, my heart rate drops, and I sit there, and
ah,
it's just a great way to quiet down. So yeah,
cool.
that's what there is to know.
Well, you got a well-rounded, very rich life. That's just awesome. Now, the number one question on our attendees' mind, virtually everybody's mind, is, are you crazy? You know, the risk of having a complete train wreck of doing all these campaigns. Number one, did you retain your sanity? Did the congregants hate you, and did your church survive?
Well, number one, you may have to ask somebody else, because usually the insane, they don't know they're insane. But if you do a capital campaign correctly, if you do it for the right reasons, you do it in the right way, you have the proper motivations, it is a life-giving experience that can transform a congregation. If it's about vision, if it's about Jesus, if it's about something different than pastoral ambition, to build a monument to yourself, or to do something that is going to, quote unquote, establish your legacy there. If it's vision grounded, if you give the people a chance to be involved, it is, and really play formative leadership roles and let them lead alongside you, it is a life-giving experience.
That's just, I love that. It's a life-giving experience, and I agree. Because I try to blend my spiritual life and my scientific interests. And I think back to Maslow, and what is his definition of self-actualization is implementing your values in some creative manner. And that's how I think about a church capital campaign.
Absolutely.
Because we get engaged. I remember Robert Greenleaf, who coined the term servant leadership. He says, such an activity lifts our sights from our moribund ways. For a moment, we get connected to something much bigger than us, and it is altruistic. It is meant to serve future generations, and it's exciting. Something happens.
Well, and if a capital campaign is really vision grounded, if it is an expression of your deepest values as a congregation, biblically inspired, biblically led, biblically formed, molded in prayer, shaped in prayer, following the leading of the Holy Spirit, it is a good thing. It is a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's talk about that second point for a moment. Gallup polling created an instrument called the ME25, which has been conducted in over 1,000 churches, and they've discovered about 15% of the congregation is willing to sit on a standing committee. The other 85% is not interested, but it helps us better understand our demographics. They also discovered that 1% of every church congregation, they assigned a title to of CAVE, which stands for consistently against virtually everything. Now, I thought that was hilarious when I found that out, but it's good to know I have them in my church. 1%, I can deal with that. Every church I have worked for, you get some complainers. So did you have 10 times as many people mad at you, or did you just have the standard 1% mad at you?
1% may seem a little bit low there, but it isn't a ton. And you can't, you have to listen to those folks, but you can't let them drive the agenda. You know, you have to really invest in people and lean into people that when you share the vision, their eyes light up. They get excited. And you have to be careful that you don't give people who have no authority the authority to say no, and the authority to just stop things, because they're going to be angry, or they're going to withhold, or they're going to stir up trouble. They don't have authority to say no. And so you work with I mean, we're Presbyterian, so we have an elder leadership structure, and the elders really drive the vision. And it's not just the pastor alone, or the staff alone, but the elders really drive the vision. And so you have to let your leaders lead. And if you have significant numbers of leaders who are saying this isn't the time, or this is a bad idea, well, that's something you need to really listen to. But if, Sally Smith comes in and says, hey, I'm against this, and my husband's against this, and I can name 4 or 5 other people who are talking about this and they hate it, you listen and you love, because it's not your response. It's not their opposition that gets you into trouble. It's your response to their opposition. That's what gets you into. That's what gets you into trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So, we, for example, we're coming off of what I think has been a pretty successful campaign, and it's been great on a lot of levels. I hope we can talk about all that. But there's a family that I deeply love and respect, and they have laid out, and they've been involved for a long time here, and have been leaders here. And I offered to meet with them with one of our elders. And they said, well, no, we're not going to meet. We love you. We love the church, but you're not going to change our mind, and we're not going to change your mind. So at this point, it's not really necessary to meet. And you have to be okay with that. That's fine. They're not in leadership right now. They have been, and so I just said, okay, that's great. So you're always going to have somebody like that. I had a guy, the first campaign that we did together, Dennis, who said to me, someone needs to pull you aside and tell you you're about 2 years too early to be doing this. A guy that I really love and respect, and is a great guy. And I just said, I think we are right on time with this thing. And turns out we were right. We were right. If that was right before 2008, if we had waited another year, then or even another 7-8 months, it wouldn't have gone over. So anyway, so you just have to live with that a little bit.
Sure. Well, so how important is it in retrospect? How important was that feasibility study where you surveyed everybody and you found out 90-something% of everybody is totally for it? You got a couple of people against it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's really important, because it's just good data that you can lean on and look at and say, hey, this is where we are, and it's not based on anecdotes or the email you got from somebody, or the last person to grab you in the church fellowship hall or whatever. And so you have hard data that you can lean upon. It also lets you know how you can structure things to create the most appeal. And it's another step, of course. I think biblically we are taught to listen to the people of God, not alone, but that's one. But you hope, if you have a congregation that's loving Jesus and following the Holy Spirit, you hope that God is talking to them. And so that's it. So this is a listening thing, and that may be another way God is speaking to you through this, that people say this and that, and it helps you form and shape things to get most in line with your God's design and plan.
Well, I love what you just said, and that totally fits with one of my heroes. Scott Peck wrote a book on community building called A Different Drum. And he said the number one way you build that sense of community is do this exact thing. You engage everybody in the dialogue. about the vision, our driving values. How can we better serve the world? And that's what pulls a congregation together. Now, I know for sure it's impossible to have absolute perfect consensus on everything. It just haven't happened to me on anything ever. But boy, when you go through that process, you get this wave of emotion and spiritual energy. You're heading in the right track, and you're affirmed by dialogue. And it takes more time and more energy. And you got to allow people to object, because boy, they're going to say important things that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And if it ever becomes the majority, boy, we better pay attention to that. Matter of fact, I don't know if I told you, but we just finished a feasibility study for a church up in Iowa where we recommended that they not do a capital campaign. We just said, hey, look, you're kind of split down the middle on moving ahead. So if it's 50-50, the answer is no. Go back to the drawing board, seek consensus. So the last question here before we move on: did the church survive? I know is a loaded question. I know your church is flourishing, but talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, so we're still early on here with things, but the whole campaign has been life-giving and energy-giving, and created more momentum, and we haven't even begin to do the improvements that we had talked about, or begin to live out the vision that we are trying to implement here. But for the first campaigns that we did with the churches in Kansas City where I served, or church in Kansas City where I served, that first campaign, which was to reduce debt, they'd had $1.5 million of debt they'd held on to for about 12 or 13 years. And one time they're making interest-only payments. And then to do some improvements to the building, that was critical in the success of that church and going ahead. And I've been there for about 3 or 4 months when we started the campaign process, because they were in dire financial straits. And so we started that process, and it was absolutely critical to moving the church ahead. Absolutely critical.
Kind of life-saving.
I think it would have been a very different situation if we had not been bold, and because it was sort of shocking to people. People were like, because they had lived in this sort of slow decline for a long time, and then here's this bold vision right out the gate, and people it was shocking, but we had incredible support to make it happen.
Yeah. So really, without that, you're facing kind of a death spiral. It's worse than malaise. I mean, financially, it could have driven that church into the ground. So I know it took some courage to do that, but boy, it caused the church to thrive. And that's the cool. It's uncomfortable to do a capital campaign, but it would have been much worse if you didn't.
That's right.
Okay, so I know we're going to move through this pretty quickly. Next question I got for you is all about engagement. Tell us about what worked in your engagement process and what didn't work.
Yeah, well, really, I think 3 things work really, really well. Is one, Dennis, you have this, the system of teams you all have, Pet Yak team, the prayer team, the events team, the youth team, the thanks team, the ambassador team, the communications team. And you get as many people involved on these teams as you can, and they're all playing a role, and they're forming things, and then you create multiple opportunities for just engagement in the active campaign. So that's one. To me, that's just genius.
Well, thanks.
2 is, town hall meetings, to listen to people, have them share their thoughts, have them share their ideas, stop at periodic points along the process and just do a check-in and give people a chance just to express themselves. And then I think 3rd is just the constant communication before they ask. And part of that communication about what you're doing is opportunities for prayer, giving them a chance to just pray. And so you're not only communicating with them, you're asking them to communicate with God. So you're doing all that together. And I'll say, Dennis, that I was sold on having you guys come here because I knew you, but our team interviewed another consultant, and we asked this very question: well, how do you engage people? And he said, well, I just tell them this is a good idea, and people usually get on board. He was a salesman. He was a salesman, and we knew that approach would not work here. It may work for some places. I don't think it's healthy overall, but you all are not salespeople necessarily first. Although you're very persuasive, you all are your organizers, and you're experts at getting people involved for the campaign. That just creates buy-in.
Right.
That's esprit de corps, and everyone pulling together in one direction is so healthy. In fact, we're right now, our staff is coming together to work on what we're calling the Christmas project, which is 12 events during Advent and Christmas, and those events are laid out, and we're going to use the Pet Yak model for those events to have individual people from the congregation work. So it isn't our staff doing it all, but involving them in that. So
well, that's great. So communication, widespread, fun level of volunteerism, and town hall meetings.
Yep.
Those things work, and I'm just over the moon happy. I mean, it fits. I mean, if you look at the best-selling management book of all time, Good to Great by Jim Collins, we learned some things from the corporate world. The greatest executives are not, General Patton riding in on a stallion, shooting off, revolvers, telling follow me. They do it by engagement. So this has a real grounding in not just common sense, but a whole ton of research that went into that book. So it's spiritual, it's common sense, it's grounded in research. And I'm just so happy that all of that came together to help your church flourish. That just makes my life worth living, Eric. So
together, great.
Thank you for that. Okay, next question. Prayer and discernment. Now, I'm sad to hear that the other consultant that you interviewed did not value highly prayer and discernment, but just rather suggested. To me, this is the real thing. This is the real reason why we're here, to facilitate people's faith journey, their own personal spiritual evolution. And I'm so happy this was a success at First Presbyterian. Tell us more about what you liked and what you didn't like. What would you do differently, if anything, next time?
Well, I would say to any pastor watching this, or someone leading a campaign, or someone in church leadership, to really pray and discern about who you ask to be head of your prayer team. That is, don't just plug in a warm body, but really get and to consider that the most important of all your teams, and ask who is one of my very best leaders, who loves Jesus, who takes prayer seriously, who will really run with this. And there's a reason. It's not just because PAYAC is a neat acronym. I'm sure you could spell other words, but P comes first, because prayer is the most important thing. And if the campaign is not grounded in prayer, you'll be selling yourself short. You're doing it on your own effort, your own work, rather than the work of the Holy Spirit, rather than the Lord leading it. And prayer, when it's done in earnestness, and it's done using Scripture, and it's done open-handedly and consistently, prayer empowers things in a way we cannot understand entirely.
But it's so cool. How cool is it? It's like just this mystical energy imbues the entire congregation with this cohesive upward focus, and it's just like nothing I've ever seen. And it's awesome to be part of.
Our prayer team not only had the prayer, the campaign prayer, and the prayer card, but they did a prayer guide daily for I think it was 40 days before Commitment Sunday, and different people wrote different different devotionals daily, and I always do a little sermon book with my sermon series. That's a study guide for each sermon, and I suspended that for the sermon leading up to the campaign, so people could do the prayer guide and focus on that. And the guide turned out great. We open every meeting with prayer, close with prayer, inviting people to prayerfully discern. And I've had a lot of anecdotal people tell me that prayer made a difference in what we did. That God led us along in this, and so we have great unity, great excitement, and I'm convinced prayer is a huge part of that. I mean, think how rare it is for most churches to come together and pray about something tangible you're doing together for your 40 days. That's pretty rare. It's pretty. I mean, we've done it a few times here and other places, but that's a pretty rare occurrence, and it was a great opportunity for us.
And powerful. That's just great. It's kind of life changing in the life of the church and in the life of the individual.
Absolutely.
I love that. I'm so happy that you agreed to participate in it. This is so joyful for me. I feel like I'm constantly learning, but it's wonderful to hear your perspective. Okay, last question.
Having a ball here.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. Okay, so there are going to be a whole ton of people watching this video, and it's going to exist in the ethers long after you and I are gone, and they're going to be reflecting on, everybody wants to be a success, everybody wants to avoid failure, but if you could just talk for a minute about, so for you personally, keys to success and real dangers to avoid.
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of the keys now already. I mean, we've sort of worked through those, getting a lot of input from people, doing the feasibility study, having people involved, prayer. I mean, those are all great things. I would say another key to success is having a bold vision that goes beyond physical needs. Bold vision for the congregation, that this is more than we heard this a lot at our church. This is about much more than a building. This is about our witness in the community. This is about who we're going to be as a congregation. And so what you're doing to the physical plant, or maybe you're reducing debt, or whatever it may be, is so closely aligned with your vision and who you seek to be as a congregation, that it's just seamless. It's just hand in glove. And so I think that's really important.
Right. But Proverbs 29:18, my second favorite scripture: where there is no vision, the people perish. That's really true.
That to me is really critical. And then the other thing I would say too, just as a pastor, I remember one time talking to a guy on the phone who was doing a capital campaign, and he was just exhausted. He's just like, he said, if I ever do this again, shoot me in the head, and I know that he tried to do it all on his own. He tried to carry the water on his own, and that's so unwise one of the teams that we didn't talk about, Dennis, was the executive team, the leadership team, or the management team. Sorry, the management team. And so that was another prayerful decision for me, is who should be on this management team. And we're still meeting, not as often. We have an all-star management team.
You do, you really do.
It couldn't be better. And so leaning on their experience, leaning on their success, allowing them to speak and lead, and really hearing what they have to say was also critical. That was just critical. And so they have
you really do
in some really tangible, formative ways.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm hearing you say be prudent about trying to carry all the water yourself.
Yeah, you have to pace yourself because, let's say you're a lead pastor or a preaching pastor or a teaching pastor.
Yeah,
Uh, how can you, because you still have to preach,
right,
still have to lead whatever leadership
right,
responsibilities you have. You
right,
have a family, maybe
right,
you have other things,
right.
and so don't you know Jesus always calls us to lead from your community,
Mhm.
or nearly all the time. There's sometimes maybe we're the role of prophet to stand alone, but that's the exception rather than the rule. And so you just really pray about and invest in that your leadership team, and that's just really key.
Mhm. Well, maybe that's a good one to end on,
Okay.
is to think about who who is doing the lead, how is the leading happening, and and how can we alleviate stress?
Hmm.
That's really the key, I think, is that your leadership is not you alone. You're with a team. Get on board some sharp people to help you think through these myriad decisions.
Yeah,
Um, so what I'm hearing you say, that's really critical. Engagement is critical. Prayer and discernment is
absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Although all those things have been keys to success that I have seen.
yeah. And we started off kind of jokingly with the train wreck picture, asking the question, are you out of your mind to do it? Are you out of your mind now from the stress? And it's obvious that not only are you of sound mind and sound body, but it was actually kind of cool. The whole thing was kind of cool.
Well, I mean, if it's any indication of how things went here, we did a capital campaign, and then 2 weeks later, I led a trip to Israel.
Yeah.
So you can do it all if you have good people around you, and you don't try to just go it alone on your own.
Right. Right. Well, maybe this is your next book, Pastor Eric. Okay. I know you got two bestsellers, but this
Yeah.
could be your third.
Well, we'll see what happens. See what happens. Would you call
Uh,
a penguin for me and you'll pitch it, see what they say?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Well, I want to wrap up by just expressing my joy to have you as a friend and a
Yeah.
co-worker in the vineyard. And we've been through a lot together, and it has
Absolutely.
really been joyful.
It has been. It has been. Love the time we get to spend together. So
Yeah. And
yes.
the bottom line is, hey, building the kingdom, the church is a better place, people are more fulfilled, and that's kind of bottom line. What's the meaning of life?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. That's right.
that's fantastic. Okay, so to wrap it up, any last sentences before we close up?
Um, well, I mean, one thing we hadn't said, and this should just maybe implied, I think having a company come alongside to help you do it, and I would certainly recommend, you guys.
Okay.
But I think that's just key because of all the work you put in, and that's just another way of you're not doing it alone. So
Right,
I
right.
think I think I think that's just absolutely key.
Right, right. Whether you hire us or not is beside the issue, but get somebody who's done it 100 times and has 20 years experience and knows the pitfalls to avoid. I think, the older I get, the less I feel like I need to land every single church as a client. Mainly, I want somebody that's a good fit. So if I find a pastor that shares those values of engagement and prayer and discernment, then I think it's not really like work.
Yeah,
It is the meaning of my life, and it does not seem like work. It's just joyful. It's the most joyful labor.
that's right.
I
That's right,
can,
and it's a great opportunity to teach about stewardship.
yeah, it's right, which is why we're here on earth. God created us to figure out how we can be a conduit for God's blessing.
Yep, it's
All
good.
right, that's a good one to end on. All right, so
Great.
Pastor Eric, I will send you a copy of this video, and I'll send it out to everybody who's enrolled, and it'll be on our YouTube channel for people to look at for
Love
years.
it.
So
Love it.
thanks a million, buddy, and I'm
Thanks.
sure I'll be
Thanks,
talking to
Dennis.
you very soon.
All right, see you later. Bye-bye.